Look, I'm gonna open up this video by saying I want the Jaguars to succeed. I want Trevor Lawrence to succeed. It's good for the NFL if Trevor Lawrence succeeds, and he was really hyped up to be the next big quarterback prospect, the next Andrew Luck, the next Peyton Manning. Ultimately, that isn't what happened in his first season, but as a result of these moves that the Jacksonville Jaguars have made this offseason, they're hoping that could be the case, right? Well, there's a lot more than what you just see in front of you. Before we get to the content, we're giving away $500 to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel. We're giving away an additional $500 to a follower of ours on Instagram. And now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I'll tell you what's really frustrating about the Jacksonville Jaguars organization. This seems like a front office that wants to run well, and they really seem to be trying to run well. I mean, you could hate Shad Khan as much as you want, but he's not being impulsive with the decisions he makes. I mean, he gave Urban Meyer maybe like 4 chances last year to prove that he was a NFL caliber head coach, and ultimately he wasn't. And I'm not gonna hate on Shad Khan for bringing on Urban Meyer and taking a chance on him, because at the end of the day, hiring a college head coach oftentimes could be the equivalent of throwing darts at a board.
You weren't any good at darts.
For all you know, Urban Meyer could have been the next Jim Harbaugh, and of course, ultimately he was not. As a matter of fact, he was horrific, and a huge reason of that had to do with stories that came out about him and off the field issues that came out about him. So I'm not trying to say that he is ever going to be a good NFL head coach. However, I do think it was worth taking the chance he did last year, and this was the best opportunity to do so because the Jacksonville Jaguars were trending upward. However, there's some things about the Jaguars that I'm still very iffy about. Yes, Trevor Lawrence had a horrific first season, and I'm not going to really hold that against him because anyone in those circumstances would probably have a pretty bad first season. To give you an idea, the man only won 3 games out of 17, had a 59.6% completion percentage, 12 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions for over 3,600 passing yards. What scared me is towards the end, they were starting to use him a little bit more in the running game, and they were willing to expose him way too much. It was like I was watching Andrew Luck Part 2, only I haven't seen any brilliance from Trevor Lawrence yet. Just a lot of ineptitude and a lot of mismanagement of this young man's career, who was supposed to be transcendent, by the way. Fortunately, the Jaguars somewhat stopped the bleeding. They moved on from Urban Meyer, but they retained Trent Baalke. And as a result, some of these decisions that are currently being made, even if they're home runs, I just don't know. I don't feel good about them. Maybe it's because I have trauma from the past, but on paper, some of these decisions that have been made today seem to be remarkable, because it looks like in addition to the first overall pick in this year's NFL draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars are getting Trevor Lawrence some help. Let's take it from the top. I think the biggest move that they made today, in my opinion at least, is agreeing to terms with former Washington Commanders guard Brandon Sherf. This is a truly remarkable decision. A former first-round pick who was drafted just 7 years ago. The guy's 30 years old and has been a tremendous pass blocker throughout his entire career. This past year, he did take a little bit of a step back, but in 2020, he has a Pro Football Focus pass blocking grade of 81.1. In 2021, he has a Pro Football Focus pass blocking grade of 72. Ultimately, I don't know what the Jaguars are planning to do in the NFL draft. I don't know if they're going to go after either Evan Neal or Ikem Ekwonu, but the fact that there is a huge point of emphasis on protecting Trevor Lawrence and not making him lose the love of football that Andrew Luck did is a very good sign for the future, even if this is Trent Baalke. Now, the Jaguars didn't finish there. They went ahead and signed Foley Fatusaki, who didn't really have the greatest year this past year, in my personal opinion, but for the New York Jets the year prior, he performed fairly well. He only had 31 solo tackles, but in 2020, he had a masterful season, and in 2019, he had a standout season as well. He did regress a little bit this past year. That could have been due in part to the fact that the Jets weren't a good team all in all, but needless to say, another great addition to add to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, in addition to this, they were able to sign the leading tackler in the NFL. Foley Fatusaki gets a 3-year, $30 million deal with $20 million guaranteed. That's not that bad of a contract for a player that did have a bad year last year, but the previous 2 years was absolutely remarkable. And in addition to this, they were able to go ahead and sign Foye Olakun, who was another former 6th round pick, gets 3 years, $45 million. It could potentially become a $46.5 million deal with $28 million guaranteed. And now we get to the part that you guys were waiting on. And I hope you understand, like, based off of the beginning of this video, I hope you realize that I try to be as unbiased as possible. I try to give credit where credit's due. And in the beginning of this video, I did see some good signings. I gave my man Trent Baalke credit where credit's due. And then he just completely screwed everything up. I mean, I have never seen such a horrific signing in my entire life. Not anything against the individual that he signed. It just a basic look at data and you'll understand that you are not to make a decision like this ever in free agency. So I had a tweet that I posted earlier on my Twitter. Maybe you guys didn't see it because I don't have that many Twitter followers, but here are the largest free agent wide receiver contracts that were signed with a new team since 2016. And if you look at this list, it's not a good list, man. Kenny Golladay, for example, signed a $72 million contract last year, and he didn't even record a single touchdown reception. Sammy Watkins signed with the Kansas City Chiefs a few years prior to that, and his best season was 600 yards receiving. Then, of course, you have Paul Richardson, Golden Tate to the New York Giants, and more recently, Corey Davis. This list speaks for itself because none of these receivers ever yielded an adequate return on their investment. Now, when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, man, this is a team that has a lot of cap space, and that's why they're on the spending frenzy that they are on. There are places that are worth investing capital into, like your offensive line, for example. It's really hard to 100% hit on an offensive lineman in the NFL draft. I've seen many a times where people thought that a specific player was going to be a surefire hit at a top pick in the NFL draft, and it never panned out. Like Cam Irving, Chance Warmack, Greg Robinson, Luke Jokel. It's very hard to hit on these picks sometimes. So I'm glad that the Jaguars did invest in their offensive line, but paying Christian Kirk what Adam Schefter is reporting that the Jacksonville Jaguars paid Christian Kirk is absolute insanity. If you don't know what this contract is, my man, it is going to blow your freaking mind. The Jacksonville Jaguars are giving former Cardinals wide receiver Christian Kirk a 4-year deal worth up to $84 million. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, $21 million per year for a wide receiver that has only had 4 100-yard receiving games in 4 years as a starter. This makes him the 3rd highest paid wide receiver in the entire NFL. I really want to know who Christian Kirk's agent is. I mean, when I was saying that, hey, Urban Meyer got fired, but the real problem is still in Jacksonville, this is what I meant. This is what I meant when I said, hey, Doug Peterson was a good hire, but the Jacksonville Jaguars chose the wrong guy. The wrong guy being Trent Baalke, because they're trying to build a team around Trent Baalke as opposed to building a team around Trevor Lawrence. This is an absolutely horrifying mistake. Unless if Christian Kirk all of a sudden becomes a 1,300-yard receiving wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars, this is an absolute mistake. You don't need to be some sort of genius, general manager, or any analyst to figure this part out. I'm trying to rationalize this signing to the best of my ability. I was looking at basic statistics, and on paper, Christian Kirk's statistics are fairly pedestrian. I'm looking at his Pro Football Focus, and on Pro Football Focus, he's pretty decent as a wide receiver, but not enough to be the 3rd highest paid wide receiver in the entire NFL. It's decisions like this that ruin transcendent talents. I feel like I'm watching Ryan Grigson and Andrew Luck all over again. And up until this point, I was saying that Trent Baalke, hey, maybe you're making some good decisions here. This absolutely screwed up all the rest of the decisions. Last year when Kenny Golladay got signed to that insane contract, I was thinking, okay, Kenny Galladay's a pretty solid wide receiver whenever you get him a good QB. Christian Kirk, yeah, you can make the argument that, hey, he was the wide receiver 3, or you could even say the wide receiver 4 for the Arizona Cardinals. As a result, he didn't get as many targets. But it's just basic negotiation, man. How on earth did he put you in a situation where you were convinced that you needed to commit $84 million to him? And I think what frustrates me the most is currently the Jacksonville Jaguars have a plethora of 6th and 7th round picks. I mean, they have 4 6th round picks and 2 7th round picks. And whether you want to say, hey, you could have just thrown darts at a board and you could have just taken a draft pick later on, or you could have hoped that Chris Olave would have fell to you with your 2nd round pick, or the fact that Amari Cooper just got traded to the Cleveland Browns for a 5th and a 6th round pick, and the Cowboys sent a 6th round pick in addition to that, so pretty much just net a 5th round pick for a wide receiver that is significantly more proven, that in my opinion is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL and has been a top 10 wide receiver throughout his entire career with the Dallas Cowboys, and again, significantly more proven than Christian Kirk, and according to this deal is significantly cheaper than Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, in my opinion, still hasn't proven that he could be a true number 1 wide receiver. Amari Cooper has. He was right there for the taking. If you were a shrewd general manager, that's the trade you would have made. That's what you would have done. Hell, give up a 4th round pick if you had to. You have the cap space to do it. Amari Cooper is 2 years older than Christian Kirk, and I think it would tremendously help Trevor Lawrence's development because it tremendously aided in Dak Prescott's development. And I think that's what bothers me the most. They just decided to throw big money at Christian Kirk instead of looking at all the available options they had. And ultimately, that's why the Jacksonville Jaguars made a horrific mistake. I can only pray that we don't lose Trevor Lawrence prematurely the way we lost Andrew Luck prematurely, because bear in mind, the reason why Andrew Luck retired was by the time he finally got a competent general manager that knew what he needed to do to make sure Andrew Luck was protected, it was too late. He hated the game of football by then, and if you got as injured as Andrew Luck did, I don't think you would blame him. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this, man. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.